My phone buzzed just as I was zipping up my coveralls. I had grease on my fingers and a half-finished hydraulic line waiting on the bench. When I saw my mom's name on the screen, I smiled and wiped my hands off on a rag before answering. "Hey, Mom," I said, tucking the phone between my shoulder and ear. "Just finishing up the bird for tomorrow. You need anything for Grandpa's birthday?" There was a pause, just long enough to make me feel it in my stomach. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice too soft, too careful. "I actually called to talk about that weekend." I turned away from the toolbox, my smile fading. "Okay." Another pause. "Well," she started again. "Clarissa asked me to make a few adjustments to the guest list. She's really trying to make the weekend special for Grandpa, you know. It's kind of a big deal." "It's his 80th, I said. "Yeah, I know. I already cleared my weekend. I even got him that leather bomber jacket replica he's always talking about, remember?" "Oh, sweetheart, I know," she said quickly. "That was very thoughtful. It's just with Clarissa bringing her fiancé and all, she's put a lot of work into creating a polished event." Polished. My stomach dropped. She thinks, well, we all kind of agree, that maybe it's best if you sit this one out. Just for this event. It's not personal. I leaned back against the metal table, jaw clenched. "Not personal," I repeated. "She's introducing Trevor to a lot of important people. He's in aerospace consulting, you know, and the whole weekend is kind of curated. She just thinks you're, well, the hangar, the job. It's not quite the right vibe." I blinked at the concrete floor. "My job?" I said, flat. I think what she meant was the lifestyle. The airport hangar, the uniform, the whole gritty side of it. You know how she is. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I do." "We're not trying to hurt your feelings." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Don't worry, I get it." There was a silence on her end. I don't know if she expected me to push back. I didn't. "Tell Grandpa happy birthday," I said. "Honey." "I've got to get back to work, Mom." I hung up before she could say more. Just stood there, phone in hand, staring at the wall of tools I'd spent a decade collecting. My throat felt tight, but I wasn't going to cry in the middle of a hangar with half a Cessna disassembled beside me. I looked down at the bomber jacket box sitting near the bench. Already wrapped, silver ribbon and all. It looked ridiculous now. A gritty lifestyle. That's what they called it. I walked over to the workbench and picked up a wrench. My hand was shaking, just a little. Not from anger, from the old familiar burn that came with being quietly cast aside. Again, they didn't want me there because I didn't match the image they wanted to sell. I was a stain on their white tablecloth, even though I'd spent years learning to read pressure lines like poetry, fixing fuselage cracks in sub-zero temps, sleeping in my truck between jobs, getting certified 3 times over while Clarissa was off doing unpaid internships in places I couldn't even pronounce. But that didn't matter now. I set the wrench down carefully. Then I pulled off my gloves and walked to the fridge in the back corner of the hangar. I grabbed a bottle of water and sat on a folding chair. Quiet, alone, and very much uninvited. Saturday morning was unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes when something big is happening somewhere else, and you're not part of it. I made eggs and toast, but ended up pushing most of it around the plate. The bomber jacket box still sat near the door, untouched. I'd wrapped it weeks ago, imagining the way Grandpa's face would light up when he opened it. Now, it just looked like a mistake. I turned on the radio out of habit, then turned it right back off. Too many cheerful voices, too much noise. Instead, I pulled on my work hoodie, grabbed my keys, and headed out. Ms. Leary's house sat just past the east side of the old airstrip. She was in her 70s, a retired air traffic controller who once managed 4 runways at Midway without breaking a sweat. She was tough and sharp, and didn't waste time pretending to like anyone. I knocked on her screen door, and she waved me in from the kitchen. "Took you long enough," she said, not unkindly. "Radio's still busted. Keeps humming like a mosquito in my ear." I smiled and slipped off my boots. "Well, I brought backup this time." "You got coffee?" she grunted and pointed to the pot. I spent the next 2 hours hunched over her kitchen table, gutting the antique radio like it was a flight panel. The wiring was a mess, but it wasn't unfixable. Most things aren't if you're patient. Ms. Leary sat across from me with a mug of instant coffee and half a crossword. We talked, like always, about planes, about terrible weather landings, about things we missed that never quite came back. You ever miss the tower? I asked. She gave me a look. Every damn day, but I don't miss the suits. Yeah, I said, nodding. That tracks. She watched me carefully as I adjusted one of the dials. Something's eating at you, she said after a long moment. I kept working. Family thing, she snorted. Aren't they all? I finished soldering the last connection and flipped the switch. The radio crackled, then came to life, humming out some old jazz station from across town. Ms. Leary smiled, just a little. Told you it wasn't dead. I nodded. Just needed someone to listen the right way. She stood up slowly and walked to the cupboard. Came back with a slice of lemon pound cake wrapped in wax paper. She pressed it into my hand without a word. For later, she said, to remind you sweetness still exists. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. We sat a little longer, drinking coffee that had long gone cold. Outside, the sun dipped low. Somewhere across the state, Clarissa was probably cutting cake and toasting to a perfect weekend. And here I was, with old jazz on the radio, a bit of wax paper cake in my jacket pocket, and the only kind of company that didn't need pretending. It wasn't the celebration I planned, but maybe it was the one I needed. Back then, it always felt like Clarissa belonged to some other kind of family, one where the napkins matched the china, and nobody ever had dirt under their fingernails. She was the golden one, polished, polite, perfectly pink-cheeked at every recital and ceremony. Clarissa danced ballet in middle school and got a standing ovation for a solo. I still swear she stumbled through. Meanwhile, I got a C+ in woodshop and was told to find something more practical. She did mock trials and youth diplomacy trips to DC. I taught myself how to repair rotors using scrap parts from a junkyard and YouTube tutorials. Guess which one got a congratulatory dinner? I was never the kid they bragged about. I didn't have trophies. I had strip bolts and half-finished schematics taped to my bedroom wall. And still, I remember the first time I took apart an old radio-controlled airplane and got it flying again. Just by feel, just by instinct. No one saw that but me. By the time I turned 22, I'd earned my A&P license and had a part-time job in a hangar near Joliet. The guys there barely looked at me the first week. It was all men twice my age, the kind who wore oil-stained ball caps and didn't trust someone who didn't smell like jet fuel. But I worked. I worked until my knuckles cracked, and my knees ached from standing on concrete 12 hours a day. I memorized the manuals. I stayed late. I volunteered to crawl into every wheel well, patch every rivet, log every inspection. One day, I was elbow deep in an old Beechcraft's hydraulic system when the head mechanic, Art, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're a natural, kid. Don't let the bastards talk you out of knowing what you're good at." I still remember how that felt. 10 years later, I'm not just a tech. I manage the diagnostics line. I lead safety briefings. I've trained half the guys that walk in now. I'm the one they call when a bird lands hot and the gauges don't make sense. I fix what other people can't even explain. And on the side, I listened. Pilots talk. They talk about money more than they think they do. Passive income, ETFs, tax shelters. One of the regional guys once gave me a whole spiel about Roth IRAs while I was replacing his starter generator. He probably didn't think I was listening, but I was. I started small. Vanguard accounts, dividends, compound interest. Every overtime check, every bonus, every tax refund went into building something. Quietly, steadily. Now, I own my house outright. A single story with a big backyard 10 minutes from the field. No mortgage, no roommates, no landlords. And my investment portfolio, $1.4 million and change. All legal, all clean, all mine. And nobody in my family knows, because none of them ever asked. Clarissa still thinks I live paycheck to paycheck, eating microwave dinners and spending my nights playing video games in a cold garage. She has no idea I built something real, something lasting, something that didn't come with applause or Instagram photos or cocktail parties. But I'm not angry about that anymore. Not the way I used to be. When you spend your whole life being invisible, you learn to love the quiet. You stop chasing recognition and start chasing clarity. And clarity for me looks like this: a quiet house, a stable job, a name that gets respect on the tarmac, and a future I built with my own 2 hands. They never saw me. But I saw myself. That's enough now. It was 5 days after Grandpa's birthday when the knock came. I was in the hangar adjusting the avionics on a Cirrus SR-22, halfway through my checklist, when I heard it. 3 sharp knocks against the metal side door. Not the main entrance, not the polite one. The kind of knock you use when you think you've got the right to be there. I wiped my hands on a rag and opened the door, expecting maybe a delivery, or one of the airport guys needing a favor. Instead, there they were. Mom, Dad, Clarissa, all lined up like they were posing for a family portrait nobody asked for. Hey, I said. Clarissa stepped forward. Her hair was perfect, of course. So was her white coat and gold necklace. The same one she wore in every picture from that weekend I wasn't invited to. She looked me up and down. Coveralls, oil on my sleeve, boots scuffed from the ramp. "Hi, Dana," she said, tight smile in place. I leaned against the doorframe. "Didn't expect to see you all here," Mom jumped in. "We thought we'd drop by and clear the air. Talk, maybe." Dad was quiet, looking anywhere but at me. Clarissa cleared her throat. "Trevor told us." I didn't move. "Told you what?" She crossed her arms, lips pressing together like she'd swallowed something sour. "That you mentored him at Continental Tech. That you were the lead on diagnostics when he interned there." "Yeah," I said. "I was." "He didn't know we were sisters," she went on. "He was just talking about this incredible tech he'd learned from. Called you a beast with aircraft logic systems. Said you were one of the reasons he stayed in aerospace." Mom nodded, trying to sound upbeat. "We had no idea you were doing that kind of work, honey." "You never asked," I said. They flinched. Clarissa stepped forward again. "And he also said," she hesitated, "he said you're financially independent, that you've got, well, he used the phrase quiet millionaire. That true?" I didn't answer, just let the silence confirm it. Clarissa blinked, her voice tight. "You should have told us." "Why?" I asked. Would it have changed whether I fit the vibe? Her jaw clenched. Mom rushed in. "We didn't come here to argue. We came because there's an opportunity." And there it was, not an apology. An opportunity. Clarissa straightened. "Trevor's been working on this concept for a diagnostic startup. Streamlined tools for smaller aviation companies. He thinks you'd be perfect for it. Maybe even a co-founder." "A co-founder," I repeated. "You've got the experience, the industry cred," Clarissa said. "And obviously, the capital." So that was it. Now that they knew I wasn't some broke hangar rat, I was useful. Suddenly, I wasn't too gritty. I wasn't too much work. Now I was a potential investor. A name they could use. I looked at each of them. Clarissa, all posture and polish. Mom, hopeful but cautious. Dad, still silent. "You didn't come here to make things right," I said. "You came here because you think I'm a resource." "That's not fair," Mom said quietly. "Isn't it?" Clarissa stepped forward again. "Dana, we're trying." I shook my head. "Number. You're trying to get something." They stood there, unsure of what to say. I didn't ask them to leave. I didn't raise my voice. I just turned and walked back to the aircraft. The doors swinging shut behind me. Let them figure it out. I had work to do. They came back the next day. Just Mom and Clarissa this time. No Trevor. No Dad. I was sitting on the front step of my house, drinking coffee from a chipped mug, when I saw their car pull up. Clarissa was already halfway out the door before it had stopped moving. Mom followed a few steps behind, clutching her purse like it held a reason to be here. "Dana," Clarissa said, "can we talk? Just for a minute." I didn't stand up. "You're already here." She hesitated. "Look, I know yesterday didn't go how you wanted." I raised an eyebrow. "You think I wanted that." She exhaled sharply, like I was the one being difficult. "Okay, maybe we didn't handle it right, but this startup, it's real. Trevor's put months into this. And you could make it incredible." "I'm not interested." "Dana," Mom said softly, stepping forward. "He said it could be a family business. You girls, working together. Isn't that something you've always wanted?" I stared into my mug, then looked up at them. "You told me I didn't belong at Grandpa's birthday because of the way I live. You called my job gritty, said I didn't match your image. But now you find out I've got money and suddenly I'm family again?" Clarissa folded her arms. That's not what this is about. No, I asked. Then what is it about? She looked at me hard. Pride. You're letting pride ruin a chance for all of us to move forward. I stood up, slow and steady. Number pride would be pretending I'm not still angry. Pretending this is all fine now that I'm convenient. Clarissa's mouth opened, but I didn't let her speak. You don't get to shut me out and then act like we're equals when you need something. You made your choice. You wanted polished and presentable. That wasn't me, and I'm okay with that. You're being dramatic, she snapped. You always do this. Make everything personal. It is personal, I said calmly. You don't get to decide when I count. Mom stepped forward again. Can't we just move past it? I looked at her. If you had called me the day after Grandpa's party and said you were sorry, maybe. If you'd asked how I was, maybe. But you didn't. You showed up with a pitch deck. They were quiet. I took a breath. You're not here to reconnect. You're here to repurpose me, and I'm done being repurposed. Clarissa shook her head like I was speaking a foreign language. You're making a mistake. I smiled, just a little. Feels more like a correction. Mom looked like she might cry, but I didn't move. I didn't soften. I had nothing left to give that didn't cost me something. You should go, I said gently. They stood there for another second, then turned and walked back to the car. That night, I sat on the back porch alone, just me and the sound of cicadas in the trees. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. The call came the next morning. I was tightening a line on a Cessna when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, thinking it was a telemarketer or maybe Mom again. But I checked the screen anyway. Clarissa. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? She sounded calmer than yesterday, almost rehearsed. Hey. I didn't want to leave things how they ended. I grabbed a rag and wiped my hands while she talked. I was thinking more about the startup, she went on. And maybe we framed it wrong. This isn't about money, Dana. It's about us. Sisterhood. Building something together. I leaned against the workbench. Sisterhood? That what we're calling it now. I'm serious, she said. You have real-world experience. Trevor and I talked about it all night. We'd want you in a leadership role. You mean after finding out I'm not broke? She went quiet. I'm not your safety net, I said. You didn't even want me at Grandpa's party. But now that you know I have certifications, industry cred, and a 7-figure portfolio, I'm suddenly valuable. It's not about the money, she said again, but softer this time. It's about respect. I gave a short laugh. No, Clarissa. If it was about respect, we wouldn't be having this conversation for the first time after Trevor clued you in. You didn't respect me until someone else did. I could hear her breathing on the line, tight and uneven. You want to talk about what I actually do? I asked. I lead diagnostics teams across 3 states. I've modernized maintenance workflows, saved companies hundreds of thousands of dollars by updating their inspection protocols, and trained entire crews on new avionics systems. I'm not just turning wrenches, Clarissa. I run things. There was a pause, a real one. I didn't know, she said quietly. Number you didn't ask. She sighed. Okay, maybe I've been blind to some stuff. I'm trying here. I don't want your startup, I said, not angry, just steady. I want a relationship where I'm not an accessory to your image. Clarissa was quiet again. I let the silence settle before adding, if you ever want to get to know me for who I am, not what I can offer, I'm open to that. But I'm not coming into anything that starts with flattery and ends in a pitch. She didn't argue this time. Finally, she said, okay, I'll think about that. I hope you do. I hung up before she could circle back or repackage the offer. My hands were shaking a little, not from nerves, but from drawing a line I knew she wasn't used to seeing. It didn't feel good. Not yet, but it felt right. Because this wasn't just about a company or a birthday party. It was about years of being underestimated, years of being looked through. And now, finally, that was ending. Not because I changed. Because I stopped letting them pretend I needed to. They showed up again 2 days later. This time, it was just Mom and Dad. No Clarissa. No startup talk. Just the 2 of them standing awkwardly on my porch like teenagers showing up late to curfew. I opened the door, leaning my shoulder against the frame. Didn't think I'd see you again this week. Mom smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Can we come in? I stepped aside. Sure, If we're here to talk, not pitch. They walked in slowly. Dad took off his cap, looked around like he hadn't been here before, even though he had, plenty of times. Back when they wanted something fixed or borrowed. I gestured to the kitchen table. We all sat down like it was a formal interview, not a conversation between blood. Mom folded her hands. We wanted to talk. Just talk. I nodded. Okay, I'm listening. She looked over at Dad, but he didn't say anything, just stared at his knuckles like they were telling him what to do. We're sorry, she began, for how we handled things, for how you've been treated. I raised an eyebrow. Treated how? She flinched. Like you were less. Like your work didn't matter, like you were just Dana with the oil-stained boots. I didn't mean for it to be like that. But it was, I said. For a long time. She nodded. You're right. I turned to Dad. Anything you want to add? He cleared his throat. I didn't know what you were doing out here, not really. I figured you were doing okay, so I didn't pry. You didn't ask, I said flatly. No, he admitted. I didn't. Mom leaned forward. We let Clarissa steer too much. We thought she had the right idea about image and reputation. We didn't stop to think about what we were doing to you. But now you do? I asked. We're trying, she said. I leaned back in my chair. You know what hurt the most? They looked at me. It wasn't the exclusion. It wasn't even the call telling me not to come. It was how easy it seemed for everyone, like it wasn't even a hard decision. Mom's eyes welled up. For once, I continued, I just wanted someone to say, Dana matters. Not Donna will understand. Not Dana's tough. Just that I matter, even if I don't fit someone else's version of success. We see that now, Mom whispered. I shook my head. You see what I've done? That's different. Dad leaned forward. What do you want from us? I paused, choosing my words. I want you to choose me because I'm me. Not because I have money or experience or a hangar full of equipment. I want to be your daughter when I'm in coveralls, not just when I'm convenient. We can try, Mom said. You can, I said, but I'm not going to chase it anymore. I'm not going to chase approval or soften myself just to be welcome at the table. They were both quiet. For once, they weren't rushing to fix it. Maybe they were finally hearing it. You can be part of my life, I said, but it's going to be on my terms now, not yours. I've bent myself into shapes I didn't recognize for years, and I'm not doing it anymore. Dad nodded slowly. Fair. Mom wiped at her eyes. That's fair. We sat there in silence, not angry, not hopeful, just real. Eventually, they stood. Mom touched my shoulder. We'll do better if you let us. I looked her in the eye. That's up to you. They walked out, leaving the door open behind them. I stood there in the quiet, still me, still whole, and finally, not performing for a seat at the table. 3 months passed. No more surprise visits. No more startup proposals. No more we just want to talk moments. And for once, I didn't spend that time waiting for the phone to ring. I spent it living. The mornings started the same. Coffee at sunrise, the hum of the airfield in the distance, and the low whoosh of planes cutting through sky as they came in from the coast. But something in me was quieter, settled, not bitter, just unhooked. I threw myself into work the way I always had, but I also made space for something else. Every other Saturday, I started volunteering at the trade school I graduated from. Just a few hours, teaching hands-on electrical diagnostics to first-year students, most of them fresh out of high school, nervous and trying too hard to act like they weren't. I recognized that energy, wanting to prove you belonged in a place that kept telling you otherwise. There was this one student, Brianna, who reminded me of myself at 20, always smudged with grease, sleeves rolled up too high, full of questions, never afraid to climb under a cowling even if she didn't know what she was looking at yet. One afternoon, after class, she handed me a folded note, no envelope, just lined notebook paper, creased 3 times. It said, "Thank you for showing me that strength doesn't have to be loud. I want to be like you, not flashy, just good." I sat with that note for a long time in my truck before I started the engine. Later that week, I hosted my first financial literacy workshop in the break room at the hangar. I'd brought it up half as a joke, expecting no takers, but 7 people showed. I talked about index funds and long plays, about how small amounts turn into real freedom if you're consistent. One of the younger guys, Javier, came up afterward and said, "No one ever talked to us like that. Like we could build something, not just survive paycheck to paycheck." That stuck with me too. In between work and teaching, I spent more time on the land behind my house, my little fig orchard. I planted it the year I got my first real raise. Everyone else would have gone for a deck or a fire pit, but not me. I'd wanted fruit trees, something that took its time, something that didn't rush to prove its worth. Now, the trees were shoulder high, full and green. A couple even had early figs clinging to the branches like tiny promises. One evening, I stood out there with a mug of tea, watching the wind move through the leaves. The sun dipped low behind the hangar. The sky looked like melted copper. "Smells like dirt and satisfaction," a voice said behind me. I turned. It was Rachel, my best friend since forever, holding a bakery box and grinning like she owned the world. "You made pound cake?" I asked, smiling. "Of course. And I brought lemon curd, because I'm not a savage." She followed me onto the porch, kicking off her boots as she went. We sat together, chewing quietly, watching the trees shift in the breeze. "You good?" she asked. I nodded. "I think I am." She nudged my arm. "Took you long enough." I laughed, the sound easy and full. Because for the first time, I wasn't building for approval. I wasn't working to prove I was worthy of belonging. I was building for me. And what I was building was strong, quiet, steady, just like me.